Good morning, Unity of Santa Barbara. Happy Sunday to you. As we are doing our videos from home, you will see that I have a Christ candle behind me, and I didn't have a white candle, so we're going with green, but the symbol is still the same. We light our Christ light from within, not only with ourselves, but for the world as well. So, namaste to you. And we start with our daily word. And our daily word comes from Monday, November the 10th, 1980, because I thought it was so apropos for today. And this is what it says. I make my individual contribution to the establishment of peace in the world. As we read the newspapers, listen to the radio, or watch the events of the world on television, we realize how closely connected the people of the world have become, how interwoven our lives are. Happenings in some part of the world are far removed from us, and they have become a part of our everyday life and interest. Every opportunity to glimpse another country's way of life, its people, or its problems, is also an opportunity to give a blessing of love and understanding, and to know that our thoughts are messengers of peace. Let us realize the full extent of Jesus' promise when he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, but I give to you." And make this the basis of our prayers for peace in the world. Our prayers are a vital link in the network of prayer that connects people all over. Through this network, peace is established. This comes from and is inspired by Psalms 34:14, where it says, "Seek peace and pursue it." Ah, I love that. So let us now have a moment of prayer. Just take that in. And as we do, let us also think of not only our congregation, but there were some people that had put some special prayer requests in our prayer box last week before we had to close down. So let's just keep our community, let's keep the world in our prayers. So just take a moment, extend your loving grace to those people that are needing some prayer right now. Tap into a time when you felt that grace was extended to you. And then just extend that out to our congregation and to the world at large. For we know that God's grace is washing and purifying this planet Earth. And so, dear God, we're so very grateful. We are grateful that we can come together in this way, and we're grateful that your grace is just coming together on this planet Earth in such a most miraculous way. We trust and we know that you've got this. And for this we give thanks. And so it is. Amen. And so now we take our vision and our mission and our core values and our statement of faith. So let us just know together that our vision is centered in divine love. We celebrate a kind and awakened world filled with peace, abundance, and joy. Just take that in. Doesn't that feel good? It's so apropos for today. Our mission is we inspire, educate, and serve to awaken our oneness with Spirit. We inspire, educate, and serve to awaken our oneness with Spirit. Our core values as Unity of Santa Barbara is we are community. We are abundance. We are love. We are God-centered. We are inclusive. We are living consciously. And our statement of faith which is the core of our unity, is there is only one presence, there's only one power in the universe and in my life, the infinite, living, loving presence of God.
Good morning, everyone. As you read in an email from us earlier this week, due to the current situation, I'm coming to you on Zoom this morning from my home in Minnesota. My message today is based on Unity's teachings about healing, health, and wholeness. I'd like to begin with a little bit of humor because it seems that it would be good for a little bit of humor now, even more than usual. So here's a story that I read the other day. It comes to us from a small town in Texas where a new bar was under construction. The members of the Baptist church in this small town objected a lot to this bar being there, and they started a project to see if they could block the thing from opening. So they did that by means of both petitions and by prayers, praying a lot for this thing not to open. Well, construction of the bar went on as scheduled right up until 1 week before it was supposed to open, at which point lightning struck the building and burned it to the ground. For a little while, the members of the Baptist church felt very smug. That is, until they got a notice that the bar owner was suing the church. He said that either through direct or indirect means, the church had been responsible for the loss of his building. The church strenuously objected to this, said they had nothing to do with all of that. And so things went on, and they got to the point where a hearing began with the judge. The judge looked at both sides and said, folks, I don't yet know how I'm going to rule on this case. But right now, it appears that we have a bar owner who strongly believes in the power of prayer and a whole church full of people who don't. Well, I want you to know that here at Unity, we strongly believe in the power of prayer, especially the power of prayer as it has to do with healing. Unity began as a healing and prayer movement in 1886. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of our movement along with her husband Charles, had been diagnosed with consumption, which today we would call tuberculosis, and had been just given a diagnosis of possibly having 6 months to live. So having given up on doctors, they had tried everything they could with doctors. Charles and Myrtle went to whoever they could find as a possible help. And one place they went was to a lecture by a guy named Eugene Weeks, who had been studying this new concept of mental healing. At that lecture, Mr. Weeks said something that hit Myrtle like a ton of bricks. He said, even though you might have in the past heard that this was hereditary, the truth is you are a child of God, and therefore you cannot possibly inherit sickness. Well, Myrtle had heard her entire life that she had a delicate disposition, that she was prone to sickness, and that she could possibly expect to develop consumption at some point in her life. When she heard Mr. Weeks's message, she began to realize that she had much more to do with her own healing than she had thought before. She began to do a system of affirmative prayer, and over the course of the next few years, managed to heal herself so completely that she went on to live for another 45 years. When she had this diagnosis, she had been 41. She lived until she was 86 and died in her sleep one night after the previous day being up on a ladder picking apples in Unity's orchard. Healing in Unity is based on the principle that we are all whole beings, no matter what the appearance might be, and that each of us is created in the image and after the likeness of God. This doesn't mean that we look like some being on a cloud named God. It means that we are all created with all of the attributes, all of the aspects of God as the deepest part of us: divine love, divine power of creation, divine wisdom, and divine aliveness. Eric Butterworth, one of our beloved Unity ministers and authors, once said, "Here in Unity, we see Jesus not as the great exception, but as the great example. He showed us all the divinity in each one of us. At our core, all the qualities that Jesus demonstrated in his life are also in us. He was, in fact, what we all are in potential. The difference was he knew and experienced oneness with God's qualities every single day." In Unity, we call that awareness and experience Christ consciousness. And it is actually available to every single one of us. Jesus' ministry was filled with stories of healing. He healed blindness, deafness, and muteness. He healed mental illness, leprosy, and rheumatism. He healed an issue of blood, paralysis, and much more. We can look at each of these healings in the Gospels, both physically and as having a metaphysical or inner meaning. Metaphysically, the Christ mind in us today heals us of mental illness, because we could all say that we're mentally ill when we believe that fear is real and love is not. It was Yogananda who said, "Everyone here on earth is crazy," and that's what he meant. The Christ mind in us heals us of inner blindness, that is, blindness to our divinity and blindness to our oneness with each other. The Christ in us heals us of inner deafness, deafness to our guidance, which is always available to us. The inner Christ heals us of paralysis, so that fear no longer immobilizes us. It heals us of inner rheumatism as we release resentments and bitterness. It heals us of inner leprosy as we stop being numb to our emotions. And the Christ in us heals us of any inner virus, like fear, which we might say is the real pandemic that is happening right now. There's an old saying that you may have heard, which goes, "Fear knocked on the door, and when when faith answered, no one was there." In Matthew 9, Jesus says to someone, "Your faith has made you whole." And in Discover the Power Within Us, Eric Butterworth said, "Faith is the perception by which we can see wholeness where there appears to be sickness. It is the conviction that where lack appears, there is plenty. That where pain appears, there is surcease. And that where it looks like chaos is happening, there is harmony." Eric continues, "In sickness, there is wholeness. Faith accepts our wholeness as the deepest truth of our being." I came across a story recently about a man. This story comes to us from the archives of religious science churches. There was a man who lived about 100 miles east of Los Angeles, and one night he lay in bed and he was dying. He overheard his doctor say to his neighbor that he may not last the night. The man's name was John. John was despondent, and the radio was on. He was kind of half listening until a program came on that was from a religious science church in Los Angeles. The minister was saying that prayer always produces results, no matter what the difficulty might be. Something in the way that minister spoke got John excited. With all of his strength, he reached out, grabbed his phone, and called the radio station, got the number of the church of the minister who had been on, was told that he would have to wait until morning in order to call that church. And so the next morning, bright and early, he did make that call. He was able to speak to the minister, and he said, I just was so inspired by what you said. I am going to come to see you in Los Angeles, and I want you to pray for me. He hung up the phone at that point before the minister had a chance to respond. Then he called his neighbor, who reluctantly agreed to drive him to the bus station. He got on the bus to go to Los Angeles and began to feel better for some reason. As he rode along in the bus, he just continued to feel a little bit more alive. When the bus stopped for lunch, John was able to actually eat a large dinner. And when they got to Los Angeles and found out, he got directions to the church, found out that it was within walking distance, was feeling good enough that he decided to walk. He walked all the way to the church, and when he got to the church, he burst in the door and he said, wow, your prayers really packed a wallop. I want you to know that you did it. I'm healed. The minister looked at him and said, well, who are you anyway? The man said, I'm John. I'm the one you've been praying with all day long. The minister said, I haven't been praying with you. I thought I was supposed to pray with you when you got here. So, of course, what happened is John's faith had made him whole. When we awaken to our oneness with God, there is no condition that is too difficult to heal. Does that mean physically? Yeah, it does mean physically. But all physical healing begins with an inner healing. I read another story the other day about a woman named Sally. When she was 50 years old, one evening she was rushed to the emergency room because she was violently ill. After some tests, Sally was told that her liver was failing, and unless she had a transplant within a month, she was probably going to die. Well, this was a shock to her because she didn't drink, and she had no other reason for believing that her liver should be compromised in any way. And yet it was. So miraculously, a liver was found, and she did get the transplant. Everything went along fine for a year, at which point she came back for another examination and was told at that examination time that this second liver was also failing, and she was going to need another liver transplant within a few months if she was going to live. On the way home from that meeting with her doctor, she thought about the time she had spent in the waiting room with another liver patient who was there for her third liver transplant. This woman was the most critical, the angriest, the most judgmental person that she thought she had ever met. And she got to thinking about Chinese medicine, in which every organ is associated with some emotional state, and the liver is associated with the emotional state of anger. Sally asked herself what anger issues she might have. And as she thought about it, she realized the biggest anger issue she had, far and away more than any others, was anger toward herself. She had grown up in a family where criticism was constant, and she had learned that nothing she did was ever good enough. And now She took this on herself and beat herself up without pity on a daily basis for even the slightest wrong. She decided right then and there that she was going to start practicing self-love. She was going to at least devote 10 minutes a day to some kind of self-love activity and was going to stop criticizing herself as much as she could. And she did all that. A few months later, when she went for another exam to get ready for this next liver transplant, her surgeon said, "Sally, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've never seen this before. Your liver has completely healed itself." The story concludes, the one I read, by saying, that was 18 years ago. And ever since then, Sally has lived with more health and happiness than she ever had before. Charles Fillmore once said, "When the mind is healed, the body naturally responds." With that in mind, we might say that the number one cause of death in the United States is called dying of a broken heart. We call it heart disease. How does the inner Christ heal this kind of disease? It says, open your heart to love. Love for others, love from others, and love for yourself. I have some background with this one. In my 30s, I remember thinking I can actually hear, or feel rather, my heart beating in my chest. It didn't seem like a healthy situation to me. And then when I did my 6-month-long course in transformation and had a breath session with deep breathing once a week, in one of those sessions, I thought I was having a heart attack. Fortunately, my coach had seen this before. And she said, "Phil, you're not having a heart attack. It's just that your heart is starting to open to love." And it was. When I heard that, I just sobbed for a while. And over the next several months, would find myself crying, and even for what looked like no reason, as I continued to open my heart to loving myself, loving everybody in my world, and receiving love from others. We could also say that the number 2 cause of death in this country could be called dying of something eating away at us. We call that cancer. How does the inner Christ heal that illness? It says, resolve your inner conflicts, and especially resolve them through constantly practicing forgiveness. My wife Laura had some experience with this one. About 15 years ago, when we were in Hartford, Laura received the diagnosis that she had breast cancer. She had a biopsy, and the biopsy showed cancerous tissues. The first thing Laura did was ask herself, what am I trying to tell myself? And she realized that in her case, she had, in a way, given up on expressing her love for others in a way that she was really good at. Like me, up until that point, Laura's education had been largely in the alternative variety. And after we closed our School of Transformation in Minneapolis, Laura thought that working with others to support their healing was behind her. And she thought to herself right at that point, it's time for me to move back in that direction, which eventually resulted in her getting her master's degree in counseling psychology with an emphasis on art therapy. But back to the story of her diagnosis with breast cancer. After having that biopsy, she was scheduled to have a lumpectomy, and she had it. And when the results of the lumpectomy came back to the surgeon called Laura and said, there are no cancerous tissues anywhere in that area, and I know that there were some there before. So she just celebrated with Laura and me the healing that had taken place. If I asked you, what is unity's first basic principle, you would probably say it is that there is one presence and one power in all the universe, and that presence and power is God. Viruses, cancer, diabetes, AIDS, and the rest have no power. There isn't God power and virus power. There isn't God power and cancer power. There is only God power. And we are all expressions of that one power. Illness isn't a sentence. It's actually a wake-up call. I wanted to share something else this morning with you from Dr. Bernie Siegel, who is my favorite author on books about healing. In his wonderful book, Peace, Love, and Healing, Bernie, the cancer surgeon, says this: when I speak to 500 people with AIDS about the value of their illness, the gift and challenge it represents, and nobody tries to remove me from the stage, I know how courageous they are and how much they have learned about healing. He goes on to say, when I talk to survivors, I am interested in how they embrace life, not in how they avoid death. Those who have learned to take on the challenge of their illness and share responsibility for their treatment have chosen the path that leads to peace of mind and healing on a spiritual level. This profoundly affects their ability to be cured physically, as the energy formerly involved in conflict is set free, and the body's immune system receives a dramatic live message. If today you have an illness, the question to ask is not, what did I do wrong? And definitely not to ask, why is God punishing me? Because God never punishes anybody. God is the energy of love. And if you have an illness, it doesn't make you a bad Unity student. We all have issues to work through and grow through. For some of us, those issues show up in our relationships. For others, they show up in our bodies. And for still others, those issues show up in our prosperity. I still remember one time when Laura and I went to see the opera. We got $100 opera tickets. And we got to the opera house. It was a cold day, so it would have been nice to park inside. Well, there was an underground parking garage at the opera house, but it was going to cost us $10 to park in that underground parking garage. I said to Laura, oh, that's exorbitant. I'm going to go see if I can find a parking spot on the street. Well, we drove around for maybe 10 minutes, and finally Laura said to me, Phil, we just spent $200 on opera tickets. Do you suppose we could give it to ourselves just to go ahead and park in that $10 underground garage? We both started to laugh and did just that. Whatever issues you're dealing with today, the questions to ask are these: what gifts do I want to receive from this? And what lifestyle change or changes is this calling for? Both Eastern medicine and Western chiropractic are based on the principle of inherent wholeness of the body. Taoism says all that's really ever wrong with our bodies is that the energy or qi is blocked. And in Unity, as far as healing goes, we say, go first to God and then go wherever God directs. In Matthew 12, Jesus heals a man with a withered hand and says, stretch forth your hand. Eric Butterworth, again in his book, Discover the Power Within You, says, I am so glad that this was included in Jesus' gospel of healing. It implies that there is always something for us to do. Again, the formula is ask for guidance or go first to God, and then do whatever Spirit directs you to do. As Eric says, you must expect to be guided because we are always guided. And you must expect, or be willing rather, to move your feet. So, whatever issues you're dealing with, excuse me, I already said that. Let me go to where I'm supposed to be on the page. As someone else said recently, and I love this one, God can't drive a parked car. No matter what issues we face, we are each facing and growing through, and no matter what our body will someday die from, the eternal truth about us is that we are always whole and that we actually cannot be harmed, the essence of who we are. So along with following your guidance, the how-tos today are: accept your eternal wholeness, no matter what the appearance is, and commit to resolving any inner conflict that you're experiencing, even, excuse me, if you don't know how, because resources always follow commitment. So ask Spirit for how to get in touch with what to do with the conflict. And be sure to make part of what you do with conflict to practice forgiveness of yourself and everyone else all day, every day. I often like to say, all miracles happen within us. They happen as changes of mind and heart. Once we experience a change from fear to love, and because our outer life always reflects our inner life, we always experience more aliveness in every way. Namaste.
And now is the time for us to take up our offering. If this service has been of value to you and you would like to give to your place of spiritual nourishment, we are open and receptive to receiving, and we do so with a grateful, grateful heart. And so now let's take our offering in our hands and give it a special blessing. Just know right now that there is infinite prosperity on planet Earth, and you are the recipient of whatever it is you are willing to accept and receive. And so we just take our unity statement together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I share. And so, dear God, I ask at this time that you not only bless these gifts being given here today, I ask that you bless each of the givers. And as each person gives from a heart of kindness and generosity, may it come back to them 1,000-fold and even more in return. May it come back to them in magical and wondrous ways. And so it is. And just to let you know, you can give through our website, and that is SantaBarbaraUnity.org. And there's a donate button, I believe, on the right-hand side. So look for that. Or you can write your check and send it directly to our address. We really appreciate your generous tithes and offerings. Thank you so very much for that. And so we close this service now with just a prayer. And so if you will, just close your eyes for a moment. Once again, we just tune in to the connectedness of each one of us here today as a community. And we know that people all across the country are listening to us. So we come together as this community as one heart, one mind. So I'm going to ask each of you to send a blessing to each person, magnifying the goodness of each person, magnifying the goodness within ourselves. So just take a moment, send a blessing to each person. And for this blessing, dear God, we give thanks. Thank you all for tuning in, being a part of our community, and we are so very grateful for you. God bless you. Namaste.